The K-Jazz Show, Sundays on Kofifi FM 97.2.
There are artists who make beautiful music, and then there are artists who create places where we can quietly meet ourselves. And our next guest has spent her career doing exactly that. Vocalist, composer, actor, and playwright Somi Kakoma, known around the world simply as Somi, returns to the K-Jazz Show with a brand new body of work that promises to be one of the year's most profound musical statements. The New York Times once described her as a virtuosic performer in full command of her instrument and powers, whilst his history, in fact, remembers her as the first African woman ever nominated for, a Grammy Award in a jazz category for her remarkable projects, The Holy Room. And many South African audiences will also remember her heartfelt tribute to our beloved Miriam Makeba through the acclaimed album and theatrical production Zenzile, the reimagination of Miriam Makeba, a project that beautifully deepened her relationship with our country and its musical heritage. Now, 6 years after releasing a collection of original songs, Somi returns with an album that asks one of life's most beautiful and perhaps most difficult questions. What does it take to bloom? And she recorded this project between Dakar, Lagos, Paris, and New York. And this new album is less about geography and more about the inner landscape, about grief, healing, belonging, womanhood, and finding home within yourself.
Sometimes love comes in the afternoon, sometimes love comes in the morning time, sometimes love comes in the evening hours, sometimes love. Sometimes love twinkles at twilight. Sometimes love stands in the high noon sun. Sometimes love sings for you at the dawn. Sometimes love, but it's always true, always true, always true, always true, but it's always true, always true, always true, always true. Sometimes love warms you in winter. Sometimes love blooms in the springtime. Sometimes love finds you in summer's eve. Sometimes love, but it's always true, always true, always true, always true, but it's always true, always true, always true, always true.
Somi, welcome to the K-Jazz Show. Welcome home.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. And the last time you and I got together, I think this was after the State Theatre performance when you, officially launched Zenzile. And since then, you've won a Mzansi Jazz Award and so much has happened. Remarkable. Let's talk about that. Let's reflect on that for a moment.
Thank you so much. Well, if we reflect on that moment in Pretoria at the State Theatre, honoring Mama Miriam in South Africa, it will always remain such a heartwarming, such an affirming moment in my life journey. It was a moment that it was one of those moments where you realize the path has not been in vain. And I feel so fortunate to feel as embraced as I do from South African audiences. And that night was sort of evidence of that, and evidence of, the evergreen blessing of Mama Miriam's voice and legacy and space-making efforts. I'm so grateful. So it's been a journey. It's opened up all kinds of opportunities and things in my life. And I'm overwhelmed with gratitude. And I'm also just thrilled to come back to my practice as a song maker, as a songwriter and composer, and share new original music. And I hope people hear that shift or growth, or as you said, that coming home to myself.
Yeah, and speaking of, the new album asks a question rather than making a statement. So, what does it take to bloom? At what point did you realize that this wasn't simply going to be the title of the album, but the question that would guide the entire journey?
I wasn't sure. I think I realized at the end. A lot of my work in the past has been about placemaking. I'm always interested in witnessing place and the people who inform and fill that place. I lived in Lagos, Nigeria for almost 2 years. I made an album called The Lagos Music Salon. I came back to New York and was living in Harlem, and I was like wanting to write about, the dignity of African immigrants in that neighborhood, but really at large in the United States. And so then it becomes a song cycle about Harlem and their journey and contribution to that neighborhood. And then even the journey of Mama Miriam, of Zenzile, the reimagination of Miriam Makeba, that album in a way was also an effort of placemaking, right? A sort of tracing of her voice, body, circulation, and then of course having to dig deep into South Africa and place and the histories that made her. So this album was sort of stepping away from place. And because I moved so many times since, once the pandemic started, I moved a number of times, more than I can actually even say out loud, between the 2020 and now. And that can feel, it is dislocating, it is disorienting. A move it really can disrupt one's nervous system. And I think what I realized in that kind of placelessness, I was still trying to map a sense of place, but within myself, right? Like realizing, despite the shifts, both professional and personal, that were asking me to make these sort of dramatic moves, physical moves, that I had to still find a stillness. I still had to know what home was to myself, within myself. And so that kind of, what does it take to bloom is about a rootedness, right? Like that longing to feel rooted in, not only in place, but again, within myself. And I think also this idea of blooming is, sometimes we talk about it as such an outward, I guess revelation, but really it's not about that shine, that outward thing. It's about, how do you, again, bloom within yourself? What is the growth I need to do to be able to feel still, to be able to be comfortable with myself where I'm standing, no matter what life hands me? Yeah.
And staying, with oneself. What was the most unfamiliar territory that you've ever had to write about, on this project?
There's a song, I would say it's called Lay It Down. There's a song called Lay It Down. It's not out yet, but it's on the album. And it is about forgiveness. And it's about how you want to put certain things, traumas, memory, whatever it might be, things that no longer serve you, to put them down. You get to a certain point in your life and you're like, I don't want to carry this anymore. I don't want to. It's not helping me. It's not helping others. I want to release it. And you invite those you love to help you lay it down. And if they can't, then sometimes it also means you have to lay down those relationships. You have to let those relationships go too.
Preach.
And it was a deeply, I wrote that song after having some very hard but necessary conversations with people I love so deeply. And so that song is about that. And I think the vulnerability that was required for me to write that down and then, vocalize it in the studio. It was quite an emotional session for me as well. Like the recording itself was quite cathartic. And yeah, so I would say that that felt the most vulnerable. Even if people don't know the longer story behind it, it felt the most vulnerable, and it felt like a topic that I haven't really approached, in the past.
You've often, In fact, let's talk about the album. Written across Dakar, Lagos, Paris, and New York. We've mentioned that. I'm curious, Somi, did each city leave its own fingerprint on these songs? Or maybe you discovered that home had become something that you'd carried rather than somewhere you've arrived.
I love that. I think that, yes, that is the revelation. It is there are two questions in there, right? And I think it's both, right? I think that, yes, you can hear a bit of Lagos, a bit of Paris, a bit of Dakar, a bit of New York in the album. Originally, I was like, oh, this next album, I'm going to go to a different African city. I'm going to record with this person and have a Senegal flavor, record with this person and have this, and like go around to like my favorite African cities and create this kind of mapping. But I went to Dakar, I started that journey there. And then but when I got to Lagos for the next project, the next song rather, I had such a great experience with Benjamin James of the Cavemen, whom I was already a fan of their work, and we had become friendly and talked about we should collaborate. And so I was like, oh, let's do a song. And then we had one session that went really well. We continued to work on the song, and then another song. And I was like, you know what? I just was so happy with where the music was going that I was like, actually, I don't want to travel to all those other places. Would you be interested in co-producing this project with me? And thankfully, he said yes. Benjamin, I'm assuming you're also familiar with the Cavemen. He had never produced anyone besides themselves, right? So it was a real kind of experimentation, which was wonderful. And we've become, dear friends, and he's such an incredible musician and ear and spirit. So anyway, so there's a lot of that Nigerian Pepe inside of the music. And I think, but you can still hear that sense of travel. You could hear New York, and you could hear, Paris and Dakar. I hear them, those places.
Yeah.
I hope people hear that too. But yeah, I think, I don't remember the second question anymore. But yes.
I want to talk about your first single, We're Fallen. It speaks about mortality with remarkable tenderness. Having listened to it as I got ready for this conversation this Sunday, it's a song that acknowledges loss without surrendering, to hopelessness. I mean, how did you find the courage to transform grief, Somi, into something so unexpectedly life-affirming?
Thank you for that question and reflection. I think, as I said, I was moving a lot, but I also lost a lot of people of these last number of years since I've released any original music. And that song, I was in the middle of working on this project. I was in Lagos working on that first song with Benjamin, and I got this news that yet another person close to me had passed. And I think some of these things come with just like, as we age, frankly, as we become older, as we move on, we move forward in our lives, you have a different kind of perspective. Of course, I was heartbroken, but it was also this thing of, there was also this thing of wanting to be who those people who love you and are no longer in this realm want you to be, and reconciling that and understanding that we have to be present with each other, So that song is about a kind of how might we be present with one another, fully present, not taking that time for granted. And also in that, realizing that we're all, yes, we're all falling, and it's talking about a kind of mortality and a kind of, honestly, a march towards the end of life. But it's also about the kind of falling down, the kind of how we are not perfect beings, how we have to extend each other grace, how we have to forgive and hold space and for each other and also for ourselves, And it felt like a very quiet opening as a first single for this album, but I also feel like we're in such complicated times. We're living through, such the politics and everything are just so fraught with so much angst and anxiety and insistence on difference and
Uncertainty.
Uncertainty, and I wanted to just invite us, and I say us because myself included, to remember that time is fleeting and we have to be as alive as we can. And in that living, extend grace, extend grace, extend grace. Again, not only to others, but also to ourselves.
There are days when I think that I need saving. Count the hurt and I feel like misbehaving. Someone pray for grace and time to let me hold one. What's the use when my heart is always breaking down? There are times when the grind is overwhelming, but picture perfect for greedy eyes and storytelling. Grin and bear it if you can, and you might just find your way. I'm not sure I even know what I'm selling now, but we're all falling, we're all falling, yes, we're all falling down, we're all falling, we're all falling, yes, we're all falling, we're all falling down, we're all falling. Someone show me how to be the love I'm seeking. No more guilt or sabotage or self-critiquing. Only the hands of time and angels can lead me on my way. I'll speak my heart while I'm here and still breathing. 'Cause we're all falling, we're all falling. Yes, we're all falling down. We're all falling, we're all falling. Yes, we're all falling, we're all falling.
PFM, this Sunday, we spend time in the company of vocalist, composer, actor, and playwright Somi. And we are talking about her upcoming project, What Does It Take to Bloom? And this body of work, of course, reaches us on the 7th of August, 2026. And during this conversation, you and I have the front row seat as we get to listen to the music exclusively here on the K-Jazz Show. And of course, we've been listening to the lead single, We All Are Falling, or We're All Falling, in fact. And this is the K-Jazz Show, the jazz circuits, every single Sunday from 12 to 12:30. Now, Somi, one line that stayed with me from your album notes is your hope is that listeners either find themselves in these songs or simply witness your coming home to yourself. That's such a vulnerable invitation. How has making this record changed your own definition of what home actually means?
Wow, that's a beautiful question. I think I used to always answer that question by saying home is wherever my mother is, and that still remains true. But again, I think, and she, appears on the album. I don't know if it's a spoiler or what, but she appears on the album.
Okay.
In many ways as So I think that she's still my compass, you know. It's not about necessarily a physical place, but I think she'll always be my compass towards where I should be, where I need to be, where my joy is, you know. Because I think that's what home is, right? Like, where do we feel most alive? Where do we feel most whole, most understood, you know, or most willing to be our most vibrant, unapologetic, in a healthy way, self, right? Like, where can you just fully live out loud and not have regrets about who you are or who you are becoming? So, you know, I think I remember Uncle Hugh Brahim Masekela said to me one time, he talked to me about global citizenship. You know, as a musician, your audience is wherever you decide to show up, because surely no matter where you go in this world, you're going to find a group of people who are open and in fact happy to receive you and to hear the music. But we just don't always know. We just haven't met all of our audiences yet or something, right? So I always think about that, like that home is where the music is. And I'm trying to lean into that, into not just where the music is, because I think music has always been home, but it is, yes, where I feel my most whole. And I guess just to quickly talk about the music part of that, I spent these last few years, as you mentioned, the Zenzile project, but you know, I spent a lot of time over these last few years doing a lot of theater. My play about Mama Miriam, and then I went on to do a Broadway play written by a Ghanaian playwright by the name of Jocelyn Bio. And what that time taught, what that last play in particular, that Broadway play, taught me was music has to be the center of what I have to offer, right? Yeah. Because in the past, in that performance, it wasn't a musical. And so every night for months, I would come out and it's like, to me, the greatest surrender is when I then offer a song. And you know, there's surrender you can find in language and acting, but it just always felt like I was stopping short of really offering my whole heart. And I think, so what's different now is I'm so clear that music is it's not just that home is where the music is, but like my home can never be without music.
Yeah.
If that makes, I don't know.
It makes absolute sense.
I feel like I said a lot just then, but I hope that was clear.
It makes absolute sense. It kind of brings in everything, you know, your life's work kind of, you know, it's almost like a full circle, you know, statement where, you know, this is where you started. This is where you've currently been traveling, and this is where you stop and you realize this is what I've been doing my whole life. Yeah.
And the reason that I've been doing it is because it's what gives me the most joy, which comes back to that thing of like, home is joy. It should be, right? So we should question what we've defined as home if we are not joyful.
And when I think about South African audiences, you know, who have embraced you for so many years, Somi, from celebrating Miriam Makeba's legacy to sharing festivals with incredible artists, you know, like Thandiswa and Msaki, what continues, you know, to draw you back to this country? And what kind of creative conversations do you feel like South African musicians inspire in you?
These are wonderful questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, I think even before I was out in the world as a young person, I was always not just fascinated by, but always so moved by the music, the voices, the culture of South Africa. I think a lot of people in the West or, you know, beyond the African continent, the introduction to South African music was usually aligned with the struggle. And I think that emotional weight, the truth-telling of it, the undeniable beauty of it, I just remember not really understanding the politics, but feeling the music, the cries, the truth so viscerally as a very young person. Like, I'd just be so moved by the music. So I think I don't think I've even talked about this publicly or in any way, but it's such a clear memory for me hearing South African music for a first time as a little girl, and just being so moved by it. So I think it's partly that history and that it's African people. And then also, obviously, over time, learning so much about the vocabulary, the South Africa's contribution to the global jazz vocabulary and field. And then having Hugh Masekela as my greatest mentor, of course, that even just brought me closer. And I'll always love South Africa in a more personal way because of my love for him, my admiration for him, my gratitude to him for all that he did for me. And then the other two things would be everything that I've learned from my journey in this kind of interdisciplinary cultural memory project around Mama Miriam. And then the last thing is community. I have deep community.
Yeah.
In South Africa, in the music and beyond, like within music and beyond music. So I'm so grateful for that. I remember coming to South Africa for the first time in 2008 for Joy of Jazz. It was my very first time there. It was my very first time performing. Sipo Sitole had seen me perform in New York and said, "Have you ever been to South Africa? Like, I think you should come." And he booked me for the Joy of Jazz. It was still in Newtown. Duduzo Makatini was my first my first friend in South Africa who was of my generation. Other than him, I only knew Uncle Hugh, right? And so it was, even now, the fact that Duduzo was still a very dear friend and brother to me, and that we've been able to journey and grow over time and space. I mean, that was 2008. He was the musical director. He put together a small band, and we've just stayed dear friends since then. And then over the years, meeting everyone else, over time. So I'm so grateful for that. I met Thandiswa Mazwai, who's my dear, dear sister and friend. I met her at Brahu's funeral. And, I always think about that moment. We did not know each other. We knew of each other, but we had never met. And she saw me distraught and she just embraced me. I remember just this person was embracing me, and somebody said, but when we finally stopped embracing, somebody said, but do you guys know each other? And because she was like, I'm Tandi's one. I was like, I am Somi. And then they were like, wait, you guys don't know each other anyway. So just that kind of open-hearted sisterhood and friendship, I'm so grateful. It's hard for me to even talk about that moment without feeling a bit emotional, but I'm grateful for that and the just there's so many people that I can speak about. But you mentioned Ta, so anyhow, so I'm just grateful. Those are some of the things that bring me back over and over.
we appreciate the love you have for South Africa, and thank you for those beautiful memories. I think you kind of had us a little bit teary-eyed there for a moment, because we're reflecting on this day with you as if we were literally right there with you. And of course, Kofifi FM, we are firmly within the jazz circuit, our exploration half hour where the afternoon meets music that you've never heard before, this Sunday, and every single Sunday from 12 until 12:30 here on the K Jazz Show. And on today's edition, we sit with the brand new music from Somi of her upcoming project, What Does It Take to Bloom? And Somi, blooming, in fact, is often romanticized as this beautiful arrival, yet your album suggests that it's actually quite messy and uncertain and ongoing. Do you think we've misunderstood growth by expecting it to look graceful when, in fact, in reality, it often feels like becoming before it becomes the actual blossoming?
Yes, I think it is. Like I feel like, again, that blooming isn't about the blossoming, isn't even about the beauty of like what people are seeing, right? It's about what you are seeing within yourself. It is about the becoming. It is about and understanding that that's going to continue to shift. So yes, it's a very internal process. But a beautiful process. Can I say one other thing that I realized I didn't mention when you asked me about South Africa?
Yeah. Please go
The
ahead.
other thing I would say about that Joy of Jazz story is that it was the first time I had been in a room of all African people who were, like at a jazz festival.
Yeah.
And who were deep listeners of the music, who understood. So South Africa is a very special place on the continent when it comes to jazz, not only because of this long history and all of these greats who have come out of the country, but it's there's a way of listening and a way of and a kind of a translation that needs not happen. I don't have to translate myself. I can stand flat-footed on a stage in Johannesburg or anywhere in SA and sing a song in Swahili or sing a song in Kinyarwanda, and people are going to appreciate or witness and respect what that offering is. And that's a very special thing that I honestly, you can have pockets of that on the continent, but it's a very different thing to have thousands of people who are committed in that kind of way, or even more intimate spaces. So I love that. Anyway, I just wanted to say that too.
We love you.
African. Yeah.
We love you. And of course, Somi, every time you visit the K Jazz Show, you remind us, that jazz is more than a genre. It's a language for asking better questions about ourselves. And of course, congratulations, on this remarkable new chapter. What Does It Take to Bloom feels less like an album and more like an invitation. It's for us to embrace uncertainty, to honor where we've been, and perhaps most importantly, trust who we are becoming. And of course, thank you for continuing to create music, Somi, that bridges continents whilst remaining deeply personal. And of course, thank you once again for sharing your journey here with us here on the K Jazz Show this Sunday.
Thank you so much, brother. Thank you.
Man. And we wish you every success with the album's release. And we certainly hope that South African audiences will welcome you back on our stages very soon. Hint, hint.
I hope so.
Well, we'll be crossing our fingers for that, of course. Somi, it's always an honor. And as we wrap up, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, man. A vocalist, composer, actor, and playwright, Somi Kagoma. And of course, she was on the K Jazz Show.